A decade ago, AAA games cost around $20 million on average to make, and then that ballooned. Just 4 years later, Grand Theft Auto V came out with a total investment of $265 million. Granted, it made $800 million literally after one day, so it was a good investment, but that's a big jump. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx we ask the question, why do games suddenly cost so much to make? To start, it's important to make a quick note. Game companies keep budgets pretty secret. So for the most part, keep that in mind whenever we talk numbers. They're most likely estimates, as most of the time they don't actually give these numbers out. That being said, so in the last 20 years, money has become worth about half of what it was worth back then. So that accounts for a raise in game budgets no matter what. But if the average AAA game cost $20 million to make in 2008, and that is only half of 20 years ago, that would mean they should cost about $30 million now, and they don't. We are regularly seeing hundreds of millions of dollars invested in games. In fact, there's been a lot of conversation about Destiny and its supposed $500 million budget that was later revealed to be specifically about the franchise of Destiny as opposed to just one game. The developers of Quantum Break Remedy Entertainment have said that in the last decade, AAA games have increased 10 times in budget. And that's pretty wild considering it started at 20, so that would mean your average AAA game costs $200 million to make. That's so much money. But let's go ahead and talk about what a game is now and what it was then. When somebody says open world now, they mean give me an open world that feels lived in, has things to do in it, isn't repetitive, and especially isn't just a bunch of fields filled with nothing. Let's just go ahead and say that a decade ago, we hadn't really come up with that criticism yet. We were on our way. Open world games had proven themselves to be kinda similar in a few of those issues, but we weren't there yet. But as criticisms built, so did the open worlds, and at this point in time, a game like, let's say, Horizon Zero Dawn, frankly has this amazing, hugely interactive, beautiful, living world that the game takes place in. And that costs money. Money that wasn't spent 10, 20 years ago when the camera wasn't quite as free as it is now. In a linear leveled game, for instance, the camera might be on rails. You might only see exactly what the developer wants you to see. And in a big budget AAA game like today's, that just doesn't exist. You can see everything you want. It's a huge open world. That's the point. In addition to that, artists have a lot more power to work with now. When they make something, they don't have to do so much to make it work in a game. 20 years ago, you would have 3D models made by single artists. You might assign an artist to a character or several characters. But in the last couple of years, AAA means lots of people. The workflow starts at a concept artist. There's people who make the 3D model, people who texture it, animators, people who rig those animations to the 3D models via a 3D skeleton, and hell, motion capture actors, voice actors. A character comes to life thanks to a lot of different people who put in months of time on a single thing. It may not be the only thing they're working on over that time, but it's labor, and it's a lot more labor than ever before. This has led a lot of game developers to want to leave the AAA space. This is why you see a lot of indie games. Frankly, people know that with a team of 5 to 10 people, you can concentrate more on things that might concentrate around a single mechanic that is a lot of fun, and those people might be willing to work for nearly nothing until the project is done and then share the profits. The fact is, labor isn't cheap, but people who are hungry and willing to push it much further can get a lot out of labor and out of the investment than a huge company that has formed a situation in which they have obligations to fulfill with their employees. Otherwise, there can be lawsuits, strikes, and any number of problems that may come down on a much more visible entity where not everybody talks to each other every day. Not everybody's always on the same page. These are people coming in to do a job that may have no interaction whatsoever with basically everyone. To contrast that, Ninja Theory had a team of 12 permanent people and a few roving employees when they made Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. It's not a particularly long game, 6 to 8 hours, but estimates keep the budget at under $9 million, and it doesn't show. The whole time you play that game, it's gorgeous. So why isn't everything like that? Well, in order to maintain a level of quality that not just anybody could do, AAA tends to do things that are non-linear and just impossible to fund regarding labor if it weren't for the fact that they're a massive company that does it all the time. When you borrow $250 million to make a game, you have to remember that investors expect back more than $250 million. Otherwise, there really would be no purpose in investing. So it's not just that games are getting bigger, it's that they have to maintain the expectation that AAA does more than your Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice type game. Otherwise, what's the point of these big companies? There has to be games that are huge and impossible to fund for there to continue to be huge companies that know how to fund and profit from huge games. Now that may sound like circular logic, and it kind of is. Hellblade was a fairly short game, but honestly, it was so much more memorable to me than a lot of these huge games that take 10 times as long to finish. Now that's not me saying they shouldn't make these huge games. I wouldn't say that. Frankly, some of these huge games I like quite a bit. But what if they were maybe like 75% the size and didn't have loot boxes or microtransactions? I mean, whether or not you make back the money off of my $60 purchase, $60 is still a lot of money for me. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's like, yeah, $60 is nothing. They do exist, but there's less of them than people who think that it's something. Would there really be that big of a backlash if games had slightly smaller open worlds? I don't know, but apparently the games industry believes that we expect them to be ever expanding, and to be frank, I'm not so certain that I really do. I just prefer the more dense open worlds as opposed to the larger ones. It doesn't really matter how much ground is there, just that the ground is populated and interesting. You could spend massive amounts of money making worlds that are large beyond my imagination, and you could populate them, make them feel lived in and all that, or you could just think about the fact that the lived in element of it is what I think a lot more people actually care about. Now, you don't get the massive metrics that you might get saying, hey, this world is 26,000 square kilometers or something like that. But do you know what they did with Horizon Zero Dawn? They made a slightly smaller open world, made it dense and lived in, and didn't tell people how big it was. And I don't think anybody cared. That game's great. I mean great. And it's one of those big long games. Still, Horizon Zero Dawn cost $47 million to make. That's around 1/5 of what Grand Theft Auto 5 cost to make. Despite it being more technologically advanced, quite a bit of time had passed since they developed Grand Theft Auto 5 obviously, but that's a pretty damn big discrepancy. And considering how much people liked Horizon, it might be time to start looking into what they do. Horizon's core team was 20 people. During peak crunch, it was apparently 250, but that certainly didn't last its entire development cycle. So between Horizon and Hellblade, you can do a lot more with less. And you don't have to chock it full of microtransactions and loot boxes. Obviously, there are other examples of bucking the trends, but if you're smart about it, it seems like you can do a lot more with significantly less. It's just that these big companies don't. And because of the expectations that they've created with both employees, investors, and the customer, I'm not sure it's possible for them to. So that leaves the question, is it a viable business model? Can they make games of this scale with these teams of employees and not have to work in a bunch of free-to-play mechanics into a premium-priced game? It kinda seems like that's not the direction they're heading at very least, but I have to imagine there's some happy medium they can get to. And some have used similar points as these to justify those free-to-play transactions in games, and that's fine. I'm not gonna attack anybody for that. You should know by now that I'm personally against that stuff in a premium-priced game. I don't care so much when it's a free game, but it just seems like it's around time to reevaluate the business model. This is the last time I'm going to mention these games, but Horizon and Hellblade showed us you can do this stuff in a different way and please all the same expectations that everybody has, and probably have significantly better margins. Horizon Zero Dawn sold 4 million copies, and Hellblade is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 700,000 to 800,000. Frankly, Horizon's profits were probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $170 to $200 million, while Hellblade brought in around 12 to 15 million in profits. There are models that work. It's not like some indie devs are just going to be able to copy Horizon Zero Dawn, come out with a game on that level with a team of 10. Please work smarter, not harder, game industry. If we've paid premium price, please don't put the free-to-play stuff in. Find another way. You can, and you should. What do you think about game size? Is it appropriate? Do we need to scale back? Do we need to keep growing? Leave us a comment, and if you like this video, please click the like button. If you're not subscribed now, it'd be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.